If there is one thing that fans of heavy metal and hard rock have been accused of over the years, it's that they are somehow these evil devil worshippers who have crossed over into the dark side. And to be fair, it's not hard to see why people who are not involved in these scenes would think exactly that. The imagery and the lyrics can be pretty intense and definitely can deal with some very dark themes, which parents, critics, and even religious leaders have used to try to validate their stance that the music is inherently negative, dangerous, and corrupting our souls by even listening to it. They see a band like Slayer and instantly assume it's just a soundtrack to violence and chaos. But psychology and research actually tell a very different story. So in this video, I want to break down why so many people who are not Satanists are drawn to this music, the true cultural context of its dark symbolism, the psychological frameworks that help explain these deeper meanings, the empirical evidence that backs up these claims, and show what studies reveal about the emotional and psychological benefits of listening to extreme music, which, spoiler alert, is directly in conflict with all these mainstream assumptions. So let's start with the basics here. Now, when we look at the actual data, it is highly evident that the majority of metal fans are not at all violent people. They are no more likely to be involved in crime, substance abuse, or occult worship than anyone else. In fact, many are actually religious or completely agnostic. The stereotype of the violent, antisocial metal fan is a cultural one that's rooted more in hysteria than anything else, like the satanic panic of the 1980s. However, again, this perception is not at all supported by empirical evidence, which is a topic that I have an entire video about that I will link down below in case you're interested. But I think the confusion lies in the fact that much of this music does seem to intentionally market itself as appearing evil in almost a theatrical way. So why then would a group largely composed of intelligent, down-to-earth, creative, and moral individuals be drawn to such dark imagery and lyrics if they themselves are not evil? I think the biggest part of the answer is rooted in deep psychological process, which is where we, of course, have to talk about the work of Carl Jung. Now, he was a founder of analytical psychology who believed that every single one of us has what he referred to as a shadow, which holds all the parts of our personality that we hide or deny. It's made up of all the emotions and urges that society tells us are bad, like our rage, our aggression, our grief, and our most primal thoughts and fears. Because we live in a culture that demands constant positivity and conformity, these parts of ourselves are often pushed down and ignored. But when we try to deny our shadow, it usually just grows stronger, which can lead to things like neurosis, projection, inner conflict, and even self-rejection. Jung believed that the only way to truly become a whole person was to integrate our shadow by acknowledging it and finding healthy ways to express it. And this is where I think hard rock and metal comes in. All these intense, sinister lyrics and morbid imagery we find aren't relatable to us because we want to worship some dark entity or use them as an instruction manual for destructive behavior. These themes simply allow us to engage with complex feelings and concepts without the expectation of literal belief or worship. In essence, they almost function as a symbolic language for our shadow, using metaphors that we can understand and connect with in a very personal and almost primal way. In other words, the music provides a psychological safe space where we can project our darker feelings, which are, by the way, completely natural to the human experience, without having to actually act on them. In fact, multiple studies, which you can find links to in the description box, have shown that extreme music can act as a very effective form of catharsis that can help listeners regulate and process anger and other intense emotions, and ultimately improve their mental health. But even beyond the shadow, these symbols also hold an even deeper archetypal meaning. Let's go ahead and take Satan, for example. Symbolically, Satan simply serves as an archetype of rebellion, the one who says no to authority, who questions rules, and refuses to conform. So lyrically, more often than not, the devil really doesn't have much to do with worshiping evil. He's usually just a mirror of human frustrations that shows a critique of authority and a desire for independence and free thought. I also think that most of the time, the imagery that's used that portrays things like skulls, fire, death, and destruction aren't true glorifications of violence. Going back to analytical psychology, we see that death is actually one of the oldest symbols of transformation. Something has to die for something new to be reborn. So when someone is screaming along to these types of lyrics, I think it's usually more about transformation and empowerment than about anything truly destructive. I also just think that being a part of these genres themselves is a show of rebellion because it's like a cultural middle finger to conformity. And I think for a lot of people, it's just a great way to experience an adrenaline rush without being in any real danger. These are both features that strongly align with the personality types that tend to be drawn to this type of music in the first place, that tend to score very high in things like openness to experience and sensation seeking. But this analysis would not be complete without talking about the incredibly supportive and tight-knit community that's involved with these scenes, which can not only be a huge part of the appeal, but can also offer additional psychological benefits. For a lot of people, the rock and metal scene is the very first place that they ever felt like they truly belonged, because so many of us feel like complete outsiders. It's a place where people who do not fit into the mainstream culture can find their tribe and be accepted for exactly who they are. So where does this leave us? Well, I think it's safe to say that this music really has nothing to do with trying to summon the devil or signify a breakdown of morality. What it really does is give us a stage to face our inner demons and process all the parts of ourselves that society tells us to ignore. Jung believed that wholeness comes not from denying our shadow, but from integrating it. And in that sense, extreme music, with all its darkness and fire and rebellion, is one of the most honest art forms we have. So those are my thoughts on the topic, but I would love to hear yours, so please leave a comment down below. I absolutely love reading through them. You guys are always so insightful and observant. Please also let me know what you'd like me to analyze next. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, and I will see you in the next video.